So we are just hitting the 1 o'clock, at least central hour. So let's start rolling. So again, our conversation today is all about guiding employees towards meaning and purpose. We have an amazing panel of speakers joining today. We'll go through and let everyone introduce themselves. We'll start with Shannon. Would love to hear a little bit about your role and what excited you about today's topic. I'll pass it over to Shannon to start. Welcome.
Sure. Thanks for the warm intro, Morgan. And I'm so excited to be here with everybody. It's awesome to see where you're all dialing in from. I am the head of people at Blueboard, and today's topic was really exciting for me because I think meaning and purpose are what make us wake up in the morning. They're what get us excited to come to work, and they're what, keep us doing things that matter to us. They keep us exploring, and they keep us excited about being out in the world and doing adventures. So I'm just thrilled to share the stage with Adam and with Morgan to talk more about this, share some ideas, share some learnings, and hopefully set you up with some tips for your own companies. So looking forward to today's presentation.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Shannon. And we have Adam as well. Adam, welcome.
Hey, everyone. I'm Adam Weber, Chief People Officer and co-founder of Emplify. And really excited to be with you all today. I love the topic of purpose and meaning. I think especially during this time, which we'll get into, what a critical time to remind people of kind of where we're going and how to help people get above the fold during difficult seasons like this. So look forward to diving in. One thing, just I guess for context on Emplify, we're an employee engagement measurement company. And so as the Chief People Officer, I kind of have a dual role. We view ourselves as a lab for best practices, where we try to do the most innovative, take the most innovative approach to employee engagement. And then I also open source all the work that I do. And so then I share it back so other people can learn. And then I also have that perspective of our entire data set of all the other companies and what is going on right now in the midst of COVID and the economy and all of those things. And so we'll bring a combination of the experience of my staff of about 50, and then also the customer base and what we're learning from companies that we serve, which usually are, ranged from any industry, typically under 1,000 employees, say between 50 and 1,000 employees.
Wonderful, Adam. Thank you so much. And again, I'm Morgan. I run our marketing team here at Blueboard. At Blueboard, we're all about really experiential rewards that help employees really find that meaning and purpose, not only just within their workforce, but also out in the world. That comes to life through their choice of an experience that might be helping them reconnect with family, learning a new passion or interest, like learning how to DJ or play guitar, or maybe take photography lessons, or as the world opens up, getting back out into the world, doing bucket list experiences like hiking Machu Picchu, or learning how to skydive, for example. So all those things that really bring work-life integration forward and help you make sure that you're being your best self, both inside and outside of the workplace. So again, thank you to all our panelists for being here today. A quick overview of what we're gonna chat through. We just checked off welcome and intros. So the 3 core themes that we're going to see ourselves rolling through, the first is really setting the context of why we're here. What are those psychological factors that are truly affecting employees as we've been navigating COVID-19, as we've been navigating changes in society and cultural movements? There's so much on everyone's mind. So what is truly present and showing up for them today? From there, we'll have Adam and Shannon walk through fresh ideas for different programs that we've implemented at Blueboard or the team has implemented at Emplify, that will help guide employees towards meaning and purpose as a tool for increasing motivation. So that'll be a part 3. And then lastly, we'll talk about, great, I put these programs into place. How do I measure to make sure they're working? And then along the way, we'll be taking questions and answering those as we have time at the end. For those of you who ask questions during registration, you might also see some of that pop up. We'll have a few questions that we'll use to drive conversation on screen, so you might see your name up in lights. But yes, along the way, we'd love to chat with you. Feel free to drop questions that you have in the chat box. You'll see that across the black Zoom bar on your screen. You can also ask questions through the Q&A module, which you'll also see on screen. And in the effort to really build community and connection, we love when you choose the toggle of all panelists and attendees. That will help your ideas scale to everyone here. Because while Adam and Shannon are bringing a ton of fresh ideas to the table, we know that there's a lot of great ideas out there with you. And we really love having the community share with each other along the way. You'll also, if you have any questions related to technical things, myself or my partner in crime, Nicole, who's on screen, will be helping field those. A few things that you might be curious about now. One, will the session be recorded? Yes, it's recording now. And we'll be writing a full recap and sharing that recording with everyone who registered next week, which means that if you do have to drop off early, no worries, you'll be getting an email with the recording and the full recap in just a few days. There will be a SHRM code at the end for anyone working on their professional development credits. Please stick around for the end. That will be shared on screen. And in the meantime, lines will be muted. So please feel free to engage with us and chat with us through text, again, via the chat and the Q&A tools. I think that covers all of our setup. So let's go ahead and kick this off. I'm going to pass it over to Shannon, who's going to lead some of that psychological factor piece, the why we're here today to talk about this. Take it away, Shannon.
Thanks again so much, Morgan. So while we were conceptualizing this webinar and talking about what we could offer that would be of value to a lot of other people leaders out in the world, you know, one of the points of conversations we had was just like, why are we talking about meaning and purpose? That led us to sort of thinking through the reality that meaning and purpose are on a lot of people's minds these days. I don't know about all of you, but my friends, my coworkers, the employees at Blueboard, you know, people are thinking a lot about what's going on and what's my role and what can I be doing in the world right now. So I think it's important for us to start with really recognizing that there's a lot happening around us, you know, potentially sort of more than ever before for most of us. There's, you know, concerns about the virus. There is an epic social and racial justice movement happening. There are extraordinary changes in all of our lives that are due to the combination or to one of those factors, things like having kids home from school or, you know, everybody working out of the house. People are moving, they're setting up shop in different places, living with family. So, you know, life is moving at a fast pace and it's different right now. And because we're humans, we're affected by all of that. Everything happening around us sort of weighs on our shoulders. So maybe in the past we could have compartmentalized, we could have said like, okay, well, that's happening at home, but now I'm going to go to work, or that's happening outside of work and I don't have to think about it right now. But when work is home and home is work, everything is blending together. School is home, school is work. Like it's just really kind of a wild world that we're in at this moment. And for me, that sort of triggered that I'm a social worker by training, and I had to kind of think about it from this perspective that we all live in a system. What's going on right now and like what's catalyzing conversation about meaning and purpose is that we have all of these different influences in our lives. We have specific people that affect how we think. We have institutions that we're a part of that affect how we live. We have our neighborhoods. We have various communities we're part of. Of course, we have different states and cities with different expectations of us. And then there's all these philosophical and spiritual beliefs that impact how we might react to a particular situation. So this is all to say, all of those different systems inform and impact our decision-making. They inform and impact what's on our minds. And all of the different people that we're interacting with have those as well. So it's this big sort of messy web that we're in, and that web is extra complicated at this moment. So we probably just have to take a moment to acknowledge that that ecosystem that we are living in is changing. It's changing fast. It's under a multitude of pressures, and that results in us all thinking and reevaluating, you know, what we're doing at work, what we're doing at home. Does it matter? Why am I here, and how should I spend my time given the context of the world that I live in? So really, as we sort of move through this presentation, I think it's just important for all of us as employers and as empathetic people to acknowledge that we're in kind of a new reality, and we have a responsibility to work with one another to figure out how to find our place in there and find what drives us during that time. So I will hand it over to Adam now to talk a little bit more specifically about the pressures, and we'll go from there.
Thank you, Shannon. I echo everything you said. I think anytime we try to pretend like this is business as usual, it is business as usual for this season. It is very different than any other season that we've likely entered into. And I love the way you talked about the balance that we're all trying to juggle between work and life. And, you know, there's so many different aspects to that. And one of the things I think that collectively, no matter what level you are inside of an org, that everyone is dealing with right now is burnout. And there's a demotivation of the global workforce that has happened. And I think that's why talking about things like meaning and purpose, which we'll get into, are so important. But you know, for us, as we think about burnout, and I want to spend a little time there, because I think we'd be remiss to try to go into the future and how you motivate people without that empathetic view to say, but where are people right now? Like, where are we? How are you showing up to this webinar today? And one of the things at Emplify, when COVID very first hit, we made a bold decision right away. We stopped all development and we spun up a COVID-specific well-being assessment so that we could better understand how the workforce was impacted by COVID. And so, you know, spun it up 2 weeks, sent it to the market. We had 1,500 companies sign up, 20,000 employees surveyed just about how COVID is impacting their work environment. And what we learned from the data is that the number one issue that people are dealing with today, it is burnout. And it's not burnout in the way you might think, because it's burnout in a way that we've never experienced as a workforce. Actually, most of the data we have shows that the transition for people who went remote went quite well. But what's been difficult, so like going from I work in an office to I work at home, like technically I can still get my job done. A lot of people are saying, gosh, I'm more productive. But the challenge is actually the life part of the work-life balance. It's the trying to do work in the midst of family members, the stress and anxiety of a global pandemic, the mental impact of losing social relationships. All of it's just led to an overall general fatigue. And from that data set, that initial data set, what we found, only 17% of the entire data set felt like their lives weren't their day-to-day life wasn't significantly disrupted. So you've got this group of people who are in the midst of significant disruption, and yet every single day they still need to show up and do work. And of course, all the data, and you can go to the next slide too, Morgan. So all the data points out this thing that all of us intuitively feel, that there is a collective exhaustion right now that we're all dealing with. And these signals lead to burnout and challenges with motivation. I'm a two-time founder. I am a work in high growth software, and I am dealing with burnout and fatigue in ways for the first time that I've had to process through. What does that look like? And then what does that look like for the rest of my workforce and for our customer base? And so let me dive in just a little bit into this concept of what is causing that burnout. So first, let's look at, on this next slide, you can see basically we measure the state of employee engagement. So on the right, you can see the 17 different drivers that create an engaged workforce or an engaged person. So there are things like psychological safety or fairness. And what's interesting is right now across all of our data, the two drivers that have been the most impacted by COVID are capacity and rest, right? And so capacity is this concept that a person has the emotional and psychological resources to do their role. And rest is this idea that I can take time off when I need it. And that capacity one really touches in on that concept of like that exhaustion, like the I don't have it in me. And the rest is interesting because in the midst of a pandemic, there is what we've seen is that there's an overwhelming sense of guilt from the workforce to take time off. How do I take time off when I have nowhere to go? What am I going to do when work is the only healthy distraction in my life right now? And so those are the types of things that we notice. But, you know, it's interesting is we measure our own company. And one of the things we found, we were in the green on all 15 other drivers, those two drivers, both in the red, capacity and rest. And that happened in June when we saw that. What we immediately did was we said, hey, for the next month, we're not working Fridays. And the reason we did that was because we needed to acknowledge that just telling people to take time off isn't enough right now, because everybody's feeling guilty to do it. We actually need to build structures and systems that allow people to take time off. And so I just wanted to lay that as a brief foundation for what this looks like what is actually happening to the workforce, because as we segue now, if that is the foundation, that is where our people are. So now let's talk about what are some practical ways out of that. And there are two drivers, I think, that practically that we're going to spend time on today that can help give a lift to your people. And those two drivers are purpose and meaning. So of those 17 with purpose and meaning, and this is where we'll spend the rest of our time today, purpose is that employees understand the why behind the business. Like, why does it exist beyond making a profit? And meaning is employees have a sense of value themselves when they immerse themselves in the role. And so as I think about these two with purpose and meaning, I think purpose is, does the business have a bigger story? Does it have a why that I resonate with? And then for meaning, it is, do I personally have a why that motivates me? And how those two things intersect together are really what we're going to talk about. And how do you invoke and inspire that inside of people to help drive performance and engagement? The reason, just before we transition to and continue, is the workforce prior to COVID really changed dramatically in the sense that in the last 20 years, what used to be the most important thing was stability, pay, compensation, benefits. And today the workforce has said, no, what I care about is leadership authenticity, the purpose and values of the business, and professional development opportunities. Those are the three most valued things of the entire workforce. And so one of these is, how can we as a company have purpose, make sure we act at the company level and activate the meaning for the person at the personal level to try to create engaged employees that create high performance cultures. So that we'll continue on. I'll hand it back to you.
Adam, everything you're talking through really resonates with me. And I can see also that a number of our attendees, it's resonating with them as well. And so, as we think about what meaning and purpose mean really inside of our roles and inside of our companies, I wanted to share a little bit more color of, how we think about them at Blueboard. And I'm guessing that's probably not a surprise that at Blueboard, meaning and purpose are key elements of our culture. And I think part of this is that, in fact, our mission at Blueboard is about finding meaning and purpose sort of personally and tying that into professionally. So our mission is to inspire people to challenge their comfort zones, to indulge in their passions, and to try new things. So as Morgan explained kind of at the beginning, as a business, we enable ways for people to have experiences that are meaningful and that connect them with like their own purpose in the world. And as a result of our business really being about these concepts, we find that when we recruit and as we build our culture through various different programs, policies, and practices, we're talking about meaning and purpose a lot. We're talking about what motivates people, what inspires them, what keeps them moving forward. So, in recruiting, we look for people who find meaning in helping others access new experiences and explore the world. And we connect that very live passion with the roles inside of our companies. So essentially, what Adam is saying and what I'm sure is happening at Emplify and what we're trying to achieve at Blueboard as well is, when we are able to have our employees, really care about something and get fulfillment on a personal level, and then connect the dots for them about how that leads to outcomes for others, whether that's help in the world, whether that is supporting the business, whether that's achieving certain goals that have been outlined, it feels really good to relate meaning and purpose together. So we talk about this in interviews. We talk about it as a part of recognition in the company. We talk about it in our all hands meetings. It's just a part of our employee journey to connect the dots between the things that really light a fire for individuals and the impact that they are able to have, or the value that they're able to bring by doing those exact things.
I echo all that. And to me, meaning and purpose is really this ability to help an employee get above the fold, to weather storms as they come, and to remind them not only why the company exists, but like, why do they exist? What is that bigger thing for them? And I know that's a really deep question, but stories are really powerful, and meaning and purpose really get at the bigger stories. And in the midst of chaotic situations, the way out of them is bigger stories. What is the bigger story of the business, and what are we working toward? What is the bigger story of my life and what I am working toward? And then the hard work of how those two things intersect. And so as I think of this question, the thing that I am asking myself and our people ops team is, how do we create an experience that intentionally reminds our employees of the bigger story of our business and the bigger story of their life and how the two things intersect?
So I was just going to comment on that intentionality, Adam. One small example of the way that we do that at Blueboard is that our concierge team, they are the ones who service our recipients, the people who are going out on experiences. And every week in our all hands, they share what we call experience wins. And that practice really helps the whole company see how the work of that one team inspires and excites our customers, but it also drives that sense of meaning and purpose for others, because we're seeing the outcomes of the work that we do, and we're seeing the comments that people are making along the way as to the experience that they're having.
We're gonna transition and talk specifically about like practical tips on ways to drive meaning and purpose inside of your org. And so the first step, and I will say this for us has been our very most effective tool, and it's vision casting. When in high stress seasons, it is critical for leadership to create or recreate a long-term vision to help people, again, like we said earlier, get above the fold. And for us, what a vision looks like, it is a vivid narrative written in present tense based in the future. So our best recommendation is to do that at a 5-year increment, so far enough away that it's kind of like big and audacious, but it will be done. And so, and many people maybe have this vision, but maybe it's like sitting a little dusty on the shelf. This is a good time to refresh and get back in front of your people. Like, what is our noble why? Why do we exist in the world, and where are we going? And it should be crystal clear as an organization right now where you're going. And so the best practices I wrote out: create a narrative on your idealized future where your purpose is lived out. What does the world look like when your company fulfills its purpose? Is the basic concept there. The second is intentionally reinforce the future. So we're constantly talking about the vision. So any time in an all company meeting, we want to make sure we're also sharing where we're going, like we're painting that picture of the future at the end. And then the way to bring that to life then is work backwards and name what are the significant milestones toward accomplishing that vision. So what are the things that the rest of the company should expect to see as we're bringing this to life? Most important right now, because a lot of companies are in a really chaotic season. Even some of the questions we've seen come in resonate with that. I would get really, really specific here on these last three. So like, what is the very next milestone you're going to accomplish? In the midst of this season, what are you going to accomplish? How will you know to celebrate? And just to let people, like, we are still moving right now. We still have a vision. We still have a purpose. This season matters right now. And then that gets into the short term, which is really like you start with this big vision, but how do we bring it to life in the short term? It's what's the next significant milestone? Explain clearly how your short-term strategy, what you're choosing to execute on right now, maps to the bigger story. How do those two things connect? And then the last is just create 2-week goals with really clear metrics and celebrate success. I couldn't stress this one enough. Like right now, really when challenges are big, goals need to be short. So really shorten the goals so that every 2 weeks, every week, we are celebrating well the things that are worthy of success. And so, and you know, for those of you that are at more the people ops level, this can happen more through your managers and encouraging your managers to do the hard work of their individual contributors of naming what success they hope to see, and then just celebrate like hell when they happen. Like make it a big deal in the short term too. And that's how you kind of connect the dots between the long-term vision and the short-term success. So that's one. I'll move over to reactivate your company's core values. This is one where, you know, it's interesting because I speak all the time. We ask people like, do you know your company core values? Or, oh, yeah, here they are. Do your employees know your company core values? And it's so rudimentary and fundamental. And yet in seasons like this, operating out of your core DNA is more critical than ever. And without activated core values, your company is likely operating in chaos. And so how can we create and reinforce the values that make us who we are? And if anything, challenging situations should elevate those values rather than minimize those values. And so again, in one of the themes, I didn't mean to make this a theme of the webinar today, but one of those themes is how are you sharing stories of other people inside the org living out the values? And I love stories because they are powerful and like people resonate. They feel human. It doesn't feel like the values are just like a list of bullets. They're not brought to life. And stories, specific examples bring those values to life. And so how can we collect, gather, and share stories of our values being lived? The second is, you know, if you are doing a refresh of your values, I recommend like actually creating logos for every single value. That's what we've done, and I can share them if anybody's interested. I've got a process on how to build your values. If you don't have values, we'll share that out with you, and then also can share the different icons. But little things like if you're fully remote, one of the things we do is we created Slack badges for every single value. And anytime someone accomplishes something that's tied to the value, so it's integrated in the culture. People put the badge at the end of the post, that sort of thing. And in the office, if you're back in the office, creating stickers or some sort of a transactional way to acknowledge a person who is living out those values. So again, the idea is how do we make our values 3-dimensional as opposed to just being words on a shelf or words in an email. Recognition tied to those values, which I think is relatively self-explanatory. But then the last one is just a challenge to traditional performance management. Traditional performance management says, what did you do? Like, are you doing a good job? Like, did you accomplish the tasks that were set before you? But value-based performance management says, how did you do it? Right? So the kind of activating your company values has two layers to it. It's not just about what you do, but it's the way of which you go about it as well. Do you uphold and exhibit our values as you are active, as you are accomplishing your goals as well? And so those are the two really practical tips I had on trying to create meaning and purpose. I will hand it back over to Shannon for expanding our scope and skill sets.
Thanks, Adam. I just totally co-sign on everything you shared and love to hear the really specific ways that you've brought your values to life. That's something that we've thought a lot about as well. And we did the Slack emojis recently, and they bring everyone so much joy. So I definitely recommend figuring out how you can integrate the values in to the day-to-day. They're not just something that's on the wall, but really about you know, how people interact and relate to each other. So my program idea is really around expanding your scope and skill sets of your employees. So this is about learning and being flexible. So the key thing that we kind of experienced at Blueboard during this really unusual time is that certain roles really ebbed and flowed. Some of the work that was very time consuming, very intense, and really was like drawing a lot of energy from people on particular teams that work changed. Some of it became less busy and like slowed down a little bit. And that opened up this opportunity where we recognized that our employees are really able to explore and try some other new and different things. So this really led us to thinking about, when you have opportunities, take those opportunities to create initiatives that will allow your employees to explore, to live out your company purpose in different and new ways, and to develop new skills. So the best practices, being more specific in that, is increase the cadence for L&D. We all say we value L&D, but do we make time for it during the workday, during the work week, during goal setting? Is learning and developing new skills a part of your goal setting? I think it's really important to normalize that learning during the workday is allowed, it's accepted, and it's in fact encouraged on your team. You can do that by having book clubs. You can bring in speakers. You can do lunch and learns. You can also encourage people to schedule a course that they're taking during the day. So it's not just that you work all day at the work that you're doing, and then if you'd like to learn a new skill or move your career forward, you have to carve out some time in your home time for making that a priority. So that's one thing that we've done, and it's been really delightful. Another is aligning roles to the purpose of the business. So during COVID, we've had to think a little bit about, does this role and the work that they were doing last season have the same potential to impact the business as it, given the conditions we're under right now? And if not, what can we do to reorient this person in the direction of something that is going to be really valuable, both for them and for the business? That's that, purpose plus meaning. So one great example we have is that we have a few employees who've been interested in exploring social media. Their normal sort of day-to-day hasn't allowed time for that, but during this time they have more freedom in their schedule. And so we created a social media squad that all began to contribute to our social media. That allowed them to develop new skills, interact with people across the company in a different way, be more cross-collaborative, and also sort of try out, would I want to move to this team? Would I want to do this full time? Does this really resonate? Is it what I thought it was? While also meeting the need of the business to have a greater social media presence. So, looking for, as Adam said, where purpose and meaning cross and capitalizing on those opportunities, that's another way. And then finally, the side projects that employees can learn through and explore, that's related to the alignment of the role. It's really just carving out that time. And I think as leaders, and particularly as people leaders, we have a responsibility to be looking around all the time to spot those opportunities. If we don't make that a part of our roles, we may miss it. And that may mean someone does get kind of bored or burned out or, just demotivated doing the same old things. So spending a little time each week understanding what the needs are on each team, where things might be changing, and knowing, how would people like to grow? How might some of my more junior employees have an opportunity to route their career in this direction, et cetera. Thanks, Morgan. The next sort of program to talk through, and it's probably not a surprise given that we are a recognition company, is making a point of doing recognition large and small. As we think about purpose and meaning, people sometimes feel like the thing that they care about may not really matter, and then that diminishes the care that they have. So if you can use recognition to help highlight the things that people on your team are doing, whether they are intangible or whether they're tangible, whether it's that huge quarterly goal that they achieved, that sales target, or whether it's actually something small, like living out a value, as Adam said, to support another coworker or something like that. It's really important to help people feel that the things that give them meaning also have purpose, and recognition is really just a tool for doing that. We do this in a bunch of different ways at Blueboard. We recommend, establishing spot recognition programs or, regular cadences of recognition. So you could do quarterly recognition or monthly or annual, or maybe you do something weekly. Likewise, we're on to stories again, something that Adam has mentioned, but mark those moments of meaning and share those stories with one another so that people can be inspired, so that they can learn, and so that they feel the connection that their work has to the larger community and even to, the larger world.
Great. So this is where we get to pop in and feature some of the awesome questions that all of you shared along the way during registration. So this first question actually came from Michelle over at Akamai. She's curious how you can host or really kind of start to kick off those one-on-one meaningful discussions who might be showing signs of burnout with certain individuals. It's a little different than like a scaled training. It's more about, again, those one-on-one individual conversations. Shannon, would love to have you start with this one.
Sure. Yeah, I think Adam and I both probably have experience with this and a little bit to share. For me, whenever individuals are showing signs of burnout or, even just wrestling with mental health and personal life issues, I think it's so important that we as leaders and also as the people who have the potential to influence our managers and how employees relate to the person who is their leader, we make space, and we make space where people can safely talk about what's going on. To do that, you really do have to build trust. You have to build meaningful relationships. You have to put in the work early on to say, it's okay to talk about what's going on. That's welcome here. You can bring your whole self to work, whether that is frustration or difficulty, or whether that's celebration and excitement. It all has a place in this place that we share together. And so, I think as a leader and also, in our manager training, we really make a point of talking about this, that managers have a duty and they are responsible for asking employees beyond, just the how's it going, but like really how's it going? And to be present for those conversations, to use active listening, to engage, and to explore what's on employees' minds. Most, aren't going to like come right out with it or, come knock on the door and say like, I need to talk to you about something. But when you regularly and repeatedly show that you care, you show empathy, and you show, true connection and authenticity in the conversations about what you're talking about with your employees, then you invite employees to share, and then that means you can develop solutions together. It's not only, just share everything, but also be a resource, provide support, provide options, show what pathways are available, and offer empathy and concern. Be the person that says, I hear what you're saying. What can I do to help you? Or what can the company do to help you? And take those conversations beyond just venting into action.
I echo that. I think, Shannon, what you said, that this really is it's really at its best at the manager level. And to add to that, if you think about, so if I go back to those 17 drivers that I showed earlier, prior to COVID, there were 2 drivers that were the lowest across our entire data set, and they were manager and psychological safety. Those were the 2 lowest drivers on our platform. So why that happened was booming economy, a whole bunch of line level managers got promoted into management for the first time, lacked the soft skills to create psychologically safe environments, created perpetual toxic cultures all throughout, companies. That issue did not go away when COVID hit. In fact, what happened was when conflicts used to be able to be resolved with face-to-face, now there's just distance being formed. And so the key here with how do you create meaningful discussions with individuals, I would actually you could just stop the sentence right there. The key is psychological safety between the manager and the employee, and the manager doing the hard work to build a safe, trusting environment where they earn the permission of the employee to open up to them. So just like specifically, if I were just to give the best thing you can do, and Shannon really said this too, it is consistent, steady one-on-ones where the employee starts the one-on-one, not the manager. And if you are more at the senior leadership level or the people ops level, you can scale this concept by creating systems and structures that scale the concept. But basically, consistent, steady one-on-ones, and then a really practical way as it relates to burnout. And this is something we do at our org. We do it from the executive team all the way down to in the entire org. We do a simple color check-in, red, yellow, green. How are you showing up today? And we've invented more colors on the spectrum now than I even knew existed. But what it does is it's a really low barrier to entry to really honest conversations. And that's really what we're after here.
I love that you mentioned the color piece, Adam, because I just put into the chat if anyone has any, kicking off questions or ways that really help people feel comfortable arriving in those conversation settings. If there's anything else that either you or Shannon have used as a, tool or question format for opening people up, would love to hear that before we move on.
Yeah. And I would just add to that too, the key with the colors, because it is so powerful. Like it's powerful at every level of the org. The key is to celebrate vulnerability. What you don't want to do is create a culture where it's always, you always have to be green. And so when you as a manager or as a leader celebrate the vulnerability of your employees, like think about that. You now have vital information to help you manage them better. And so what we actually want is to create those safe environments so we truly know where our people are, so we can meet their needs.
I love that. Thank you. We have one more question that came in from Rebecca over at Altus. I'm really thinking about people who might be joining companies remotely. They've maybe never even visited your office. Are there any recommendations for inspiring meaning and purpose for those who might not be physically, connected with people in person or physically at an office space where values might be painted on the wall, for example? What are some tips for thinking about making those drivers really core for new staff who are joining remotely? And Adam, we'll start with you on this one.
Oh, yeah, great. Well, one, this is brand new for us. I will say we were a total office culture until, Tom Hanks. And then the day after Tom Hanks, we have been, is that what it's called? I don't know if there's like a formal term for Tom Hanks Day, but we went fully remote and we have been fully remote since that day. And one of the, and we're onboarding actually people next week. We've got four brand new folks that are starting next week. And so one of the things that we're working on is physical artifacts, like how can we create mailers. So one of the things we created was that vision, going back to the vision, we took our vision and made it like an interactive journal, and we mail that on onboarding. And that also will have the stickers of each of those, our 6 core values as well. So that's one. The other is mapping in onboarding, like and you can do this through Zoom, but just like mapping the person's personal meaning to the company's purpose. Just an exercise of helping them think through that. And then we usually share back to the company too, like we use Slack for a lot of our like internal communication. So part of our welcome is like an interview with that person and ask them why they chose to join our purpose. Our purpose is really central to what we're trying to do. We're trying to help all people achieve their true potential at work. So what inspired you to join the company, and what is it about your role and how it ties into that purpose? And so we actually ask them to surface up to the company in their own words how they believe their new role ties to our larger purpose as well. And then, sorry, just because I'm rattling through tips and tricks, my last one is we always integrate cross-departmental coffee Zooms into onboarding as well. I think just getting different layers where it's just like, 15 to 30 minutes of just like meeting someone from a different department is another way. And even giving that other person some practical questions to ask that are tied to our mission, vision, or, purpose, vision, values.
Piling on a little bit to what Adam said, we do a number of these things as well, and some of them in the Blueboardy way. So I thought I would share what that looks like. Particularly, during onboarding, we make a really strong effort for our new boarders, as we call them, to spend time with our founders. And I hear after every one of those sessions that the new employees are like, wow, I felt so valued. I felt so important that the founder spent an hour and a half with me talking through the mission, vision, and values. That FaceTime, early on, and right now it's on Zoom, but when we have a class of onboarders, whether it's one person or whether it's 5 or 10 people, we still make sure that the CEO and the COO, our co-founders, are there and connecting, and they're talking about why did we start this business, and what brings us here every day. And it just ends up being really inspirational for our new boarders. So that's one. And then another thing that we do during onboarding that's very Blueboardy is that we actually send all of our new employees a Blueboarding reward so that they get to actually experience the product and experience what it feels like to be the recipient of recognition and of the thing that we are all making together, so that one, they can talk about it more and they understand it, but two, that they get that exciting lift in their lives of, wow, like I'm valuable enough to this company that they are helping me get out into the world and do something that matters. And so for us, I think that really is like, you can kind of see the neurons firing there of like, oh, I pretty much knew what I was getting into. I thought about it from a conceptual level, but then from an experiential level, like actually doing it, you see just sort of like everything firing and you're like, oh yeah, wow, that really makes sense to me. So I think those are two ways that early on, we just really inspire that meaning and purpose.
Adding on to Shannon's comment on the onboarding gift, it's also just an amazing way for people to connect with each other, to talk about shared interests and passions as people are redeeming their Blueboard reward. So it's often, as you're meeting someone for the first time, it's like, have you checked out the menu yet? What are you up to? What are you going to go out and do? And it's a really great way to, in the vein of like practicing bringing your whole self to work, for someone to maybe say, hey, I'm going to go do the surfing lesson. I've been totally terrified of the water, but I'm ready to, challenge my comfort zone. So it opens up a lot of great kind of personal dialogue in that vein too.
I'm impressed that I made it to 48 minutes before I accidentally sent a message that I meant to make just to you, to everyone. So could have been worse. I feel like, I'm pretty proud of myself. 48 minutes is pretty good.
On that note, Adam, before we move on, I was going to ask you some of the tactics of the color chart, which have come through the chat, so that we can share that with the whole group. We had someone ask if it's something about just related to top down. How did you get buy-in? I just wanted to name that person. Jennifer, thank you for your question. Jennifer was asking, how did you get support from leadership to incorporate the color check-in? And then separately, someone was also asking if it's Jeff was asking if it's an online survey now, since we are at Zoom, or if it's typically like a physical item that you might bring to a meeting and share. What does that look like from a buy-in perspective? And then how does it physically come to life? If you want to comment on that quickly.
Yeah, so on the color side, as far as gaining buy-in, and that color concept I got from an organization called Reboot. And so if you just look up Reboot and then the color, you'll see kind of how they lay it out. I've created we really simplified some of theirs just to keep it where it was active. At our company, a little different because it started at the leadership level and then it's trickled down organically. But one of the things I always challenge for others is if you can just do that at your team level initially and show the impact, or tell some stories around how it is impacting that team, that is one really good way to gain buy-in and almost have like a viral nature to it. And then on the second part, I think, explain the second part again. I wasn't sure I totally followed what or do you think that will be covered oh, go ahead.
Yeah, more so, how does it come to life? So is it now in Zoom, are they just saying, oh, I'm agreeing today, or is there some type of a physical emblem or totem that you carry around with you to kind of share the color in a meeting setting?
So, and I'm sure there's got to be a million ways you can do this. How we practically do it is we do 30-minute one-on-ones with every manager does a 30-minute one-on-one every week with the employees. And so it's during that one-on-one, it's the first 5 minutes of that one-on-one. And it just starts with, what color, what are you showing up today? What color are you showing up today?
Okay, so they're just saying it out loud in this case.
Yeah, it's verbal on Zoom, whatever the medium may be. We do it at the executive level. Even before every executive meeting starts, we do an around and just kind of share where we are. It's a really good way also just to remind all of us that we're real people, and that sometimes you may be red and it has nothing to do with work. It's that you've got, a baby running in the background or whatever it may be, right? There's all sorts of factors that we're all dealing with for the first time. It humanizes all of us, and it helps us interact, I think, in healthier ways too.
Absolutely. Wonderful. Thank you. And thanks to Rebecca, if she's on, for the question. So just as we wrap up, Adam's going to take it from here. The last piece of the puzzle is great. We put all these programs into place. How are we going to measure our effectiveness? So I'll pass it back over to Adam to close us up.
Sure. Well, thanks everyone. I've just really enjoyed sharing on this topic. For us, as it relates to measuring engagement, the concept here is really that when you measure, it creates focus and priorities. We are all constantly dealing with an endless amount of priorities, competing priorities. And what great measurement does, you could go to that next slide, but really at the core level, what great measurement does is it fills in the gap between gathering feedback from your employees and relating them into predictable actions or business outcomes. That's really the core challenge, is how do we gather data that provides focus, because we could do a million things, but how can we choose the one thing that will actually move the needle to drive high performance cultures, more engaged cultures? And so our general format, and you can do this in a lot of different ways, this is our system, but you can apply it manually for really small businesses, you can scale it in different ways, but it's simply this, it's that when you gather feedback from employees, from that you should gain actionable insights. What are we learning? Which of those drivers are off by what team? Or right now, with like D&I, for example, are there fairness issues that need to be addressed inside the company? And so we need clarity on what is causing disengagement. And then to actually move the culture, what you need then is to make sure that the executive team has clarity of that data and of the actions. And while that is happening, that managers at the individual level also have clarity on what to do at the team-wide level. And so that is kind of the totality. It's, and when those things work together, that is how you create best-in-class high-performance cultures. Just a couple practical tips. This is kind of our basic system that we run, but a couple practical tips too that we get into on that next slide are: make sure you're measuring the right things. So you want to make sure that what you're looking at isn't things like satisfaction, but engagement. So satisfaction would be like, are they going to quit? Will they refer their friends? But if you pay someone too much money to do too little work, they're going to tell their friends to come work there. What we're looking for is, are our people motivated to show up and bring their best self? Do they feel safe? Can they share confidentially? So, is it an outside party that protects the data? Can we segment in ways that are relevant to us, whether it's by location or by ethnicity or gender, all, different ways that are meaningful. And then probably the most important is that you don't do it just once a year. The old model was like, you'd measure once a year, you'd build this massive action plan that took 4 months to build, only to tell people your issue is you weren't talking enough about what you were going to do, or you weren't communicating well enough. And then it's just a perpetual method of just letting people down. And so if you can just consistently measure, commit to the right small action, and then remeasure, what you do is you align the employee and the leadership team and the managers all in one cohesive, you're basically creating a common language about the employee experience. So that's all on my end. Shannon, feel free to add any commentary here.
Yeah, I was just going to echo a couple things that you said or underline them. That bridge image really, really hits me, because I think so much in surveying, people with excellent intentions start over on the survey side. They gather the employee feedback. They discover insights. They may even come up with an action plan, and then they stay in the middle of the bridge. They don't share that information in a way that makes it possible to begin to take steps and to learn from it. And so I think one of the big learnings that I've had from surveying is, when you're surveying, make sure you know what you're going to try to do with that information. Who is your audience? Where are you going to take it? And, do whatever you need to do to be accountable to that. You don't want your team to feel like, okay, I've been typing in these Google forms, or I've been using this tool every 3 months or every year, and every time I've said this, this, and this, and nobody's ever said anything to me about it. Nobody's ever gotten up in front of the company and said, the outcome of the survey was this, and we're going to do this. And so I think it's just so critical for us as people leaders to make sure that when we ask our employees to share information with us and to reflect and to offer their feedback and ideas, that we are accountable back to them, that we share the outcomes of those surveys, and also that we show what is happening going forward. So that was my little addition.
I wanted to also add, Adam, that a really critical piece that often gets missed is the equip managers to ask, because you might actually go through the process of doing a really grand display of the outcomes and talk at a high level about programs that the company will adopt. But if there isn't training or there isn't accountability to managers to do those things and to bring them to life at that smaller micro level, it might not be that it's as effective as possible. So the training and the execution and the follow-up is equally important, and something that we don't often think about, but I love to illustrate it in this visual.
Yeah, and I think you're both getting at the thing that we all know, which is like, if you gather employee data and don't do anything with it, there's no bridge. You just make things worse. And you perpetuate a feeling that employees have, which is they're longing to have their voice heard, but it actually needs to be heard, right? And so having a system that leads to predictable action is your pathway to healthy feedback relationships.
Yeah, absolutely. We have a great question that we're going to end on from Linda really quickly, but before we do that, I'm going to jump into some quick sponsor announcements. We can't do these webinars without the help of our sponsors. So we're actually going to run a poll that you'll see in the background. This is your opportunity if you've loved what Adam and Shannon have been sharing, if you want to learn more about Blueboard, and I'll talk a little bit more about Blueboard, and so will Adam on the Emplify side. Feel free to use this poll over the next minute to share your thoughts with us. If you'd like for the sales team to reach out to you directly afterwards, feel free to say yes. So just a quick recap on Blueboard. We're ultimately a recognition platform that's all about meaningful experiences. You'll see what some of those experiences look like on screen. They might be experiences that are comfortable for today, like investing in that much needed Peloton experience to decompress and unwind after the day, or something family oriented, like building a DIY backyard greenhouse together and growing some tomatoes, which has personally brought me a ton of meaning and purpose in my quarantine life over the last several months. Or for tomorrow, adventures that might get you out your local backyard, maybe doing a staycation, touring national parks, or even checking off some of those bucket list trips, like maybe checking out Jackson Hole or going to the Bourbon Trail, which is right outside of my backyard here in Kentucky. So whether it's for anniversary awards, for spot recognition, which we talked a ton about related to employees going above and beyond, or living your company values during this time, or even supporting sales leaders on the sales incentive and President's Club side, we'd love to connect with you. Feel free to drop us a note on the poll. So that's a little bit about Blueboard, and then I'll pass it over to Adam to share more about Emplify.
Thank you. Yeah. So Emplify is an engagement measurement company. We do three main things: simple assessments for employees, clear guidance for executives, and actionable coaching for managers. The key to what we do is we looked at the market, especially for companies under 1,000, and saw that too often gathering employee data was political. It put too much weight on the HR team's shoulders. And so what we do is we take the concept of an engagement strategist or a consultant. We basically pair you with a consultant and best-in-class technology to help isolate a couple times a year a really simple assessment that leads to really predictable actions that transform the culture.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing that. We're going to land on our SHRM code really quickly. For those of you collecting the PDC, it's the 20CMY5T. And while we land on this slide, we can close up the conversation speaking to Linda's question. And just to recap that for Shannon and Adam, it was this notion of a balance that your leadership team might be facing, and actually a similar question that came through the live Q&A, which is this notion of, if a company is facing profitability challenges, maybe it's really hard to encourage people to take time off because you really need them in the zone. You need them working maybe harder than they have before because your business might be at risk. How do you then encourage your leadership team to strike a balance of still empowering people to raise a hand if they need that much needed time and to create space for taking that time, while also being really mindful of the company's financial situation? So Adam, I'll let you speak to that, and if Shannon has any comments, and thank you all for joining. We'll wrap up with this last question together.
Yeah, well, thank you, everyone. I've really appreciated the time. I will say, believe it or not, this is probably the most common question that I get at the different webinars that I do. There's no easy answer, but I will say this: there's never been a time in our culture where we valued authenticity more, and transparency and authenticity. We live in a transparent world where you can apply for jobs, you can write reviews everywhere you go. Everything's from your phone, And so the more transparent and authentic that CEO or leader can be about the candid reality of the business, and then when you have to make hard decisions, peel back the curtain on the decision-making process. We've seen employees are incredibly resilient to difficult decisions, even if they don't agree, as long as they understand your thought process on how you got there. Best example I have is like our school system right now, trying to go back to school. They're holding weekly Q&As with the superintendent and he shares his thought process. And I'd love to say I'm exactly where he is every single week, but what I respect is the intentionality with which he's making the decision. And so I would recommend that basic framework for anyone who's having to make a difficult time. And I'm sorry that you are too. So.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. Shannon, did you have anything else to add? If not, we'll close up here, which would be just for Adam and Shannon, if there's anything that you want to leave the audience with, anything that stuck out to you as a key takeaway, we'd love to hear that from you as we close.
Well, I thought Shannon was going to chime in. I didn't want to go too many times here. I think making the intangible tangible. I loved when Shannon said that, and just like recognizing, being more intentional about recognizing, which I think can be such a lift right now as well. But I like that small nuance on trying to make intangible things tangible.
Mm-hmm. Great. Shannon, what about you? Did you have a favorite takeaway to leave the audience with?
Yeah, I loved so many of the things that Adam shared during this talk today. And I think the most important takeaway for me is the idea of how purpose and meaning and values all come together. There's sort of this like beautiful pyramid that should be constantly reinforcing one another. And I think if we as people leaders spend some time connecting the dots for our teams, I think it just really, we see the benefits in incredible ways.
Wonderful. And we have actually still a ton of people on with us. We had over 300, close to 400 people live with us. So I'm so thankful for everyone who joined today. Thank you for being part of our growing community and Emplify's as well. As we wrap up, we'll leave you with this charge, which is, of all the things you learned today, what's one item that you might put into practice to help better guide meaning and purpose for your own company? I know for me, I'm very inspired. I loved hearing about all the drivers that Adam walked through and thinking about how those come to life, as well as the yellow, green, red model. I'll be probably putting that into practice with my team as well during one-on-one. So I'm excited and motivated to take charge after today's session. A huge thank you again to Adam, to Shannon, and to Nicole, my partner in crime at Emplify, and to all of you who joined today. Have a wonderful rest of your week, and we will see you online very soon. Bye, everyone.